everyone, welcome into the Dev Insight, where we get to ask, well, I guess you get to ask questions. I also get to ask some questions about the most recent update, which was yesterday. We got to see, well, the update's Tuesday, but the patch notes for it was yesterday, or the update notes for it was yesterday, which, by the way, officially is on the website now, and I know because I have it open on the website in front of me. So if you were like, wanted it, you tried to check it out earlier, but you just... maybe you hate Google Docs or something. Well, now, good news. You can go to smitegame.com, go to the news tab, or it might even be on like the main page, but I always go to the news, and then immediately it's just going to be that top box. You can click on it. I see it linked by Jameson in chat. Yeah. I see it pinned as the message in chat. So you really don't have an excuse to not get it. But open those up, look through it. If you watched yesterday, put your questions in chat. Lermy and Clumzy are joining me, and both of them have chat in front of them. And so we'll throw your questions up, and we'll be talking about it and going through, I guess, a lot of it. But I guess up front, it's, a pretty big shift, right? We're going to a new season, which is a huge deal, right? And not only having that, but like 10-9, it feels like we're really deep in the year at this point. Yep. So was getting the new season online like this time around, was that any easier because you had already done it, or because there were so many changes it still felt as frantic as normal?
I don't think just going from season to season or patch to patch really gets necessarily any easier. Yeah. These seasons sure are larger, but we have a pretty formulaic process of how we're going through each of these patches. But for us, it's really just like the content of each one, and this one specifically has a lot going into it between the different totem effects and conquest and all the different balance changes. So yeah, I mean, this time around, I wouldn't say it was necessarily any easier, but that's probably a good thing, because if it ever got too easy, it's almost like getting complacent, right? You want to just make sure the things
we didn't do enough
the cracks time, or exactly that we make sure we hit the correct mark.
And trust me, I'm looking at the scroll bar on this. There's enough, and like it was really fun because like we got to do a lot of the play tests coming into that. And my favorite part, it was even in the Google Doc. So if you didn't open that, I don't know if it's listed on here on the Smite news page. I'll see that, I guess, if I scroll down. But what you sent, Laramie, was spicy changes. And it was like with peppers and everything. Like, here are the gods that are like, we did something to see what's going to happen. Like, is it going to work out better? Shifts for like Athena, Osiris now having the sickle go through minions, things like that like just really change the feel of the character without having to really change the feel of the character.
Absolutely.
And so I guess like for those changes, like why did we come up for this season to have like, let's get a lot of spicy changes in there?
So we were kind of looking for another big gameplay beat, and we had done a big variety of changes this year, but we wanted to kind of focus more in on underperformers this specific time around, or just unpopular characters that had quote-unquote problems, you might say, right? We wanted to basically focus in on these characters are not played, underperforming for XYZ reason. Let's figure out a way to freshen them up a little bit, either to give them a little bit more time in the spotlight, to perhaps make them more popular, give more people, eyes on these characters. Maybe they like them if they try them, so just get people trying new things. But I think in general, a lot of it was coming from like a problem-solving angle, where it's like you look at the win rates across like all of these different modes, all of these different levels of players as well. And if someone is consistently underperforming, I'm thinking like specifically Osiris was a really big case. So we were like, okay, we got to give this guy something. And then we were like, well, if we just buff him, that's kind of just putting him back where he was. We don't necessarily want to just make him a powerhouse again in the same way that he was, during the big mitigation meta. That's just an example, right? But like, just go with me on this one.
Yeah.
It was a lot of that thinking of like, how can we give them something fresh, a new way to play these characters, or to simplify them in some ways, or complicate them from others. So like you have the kind of contrast between Arthur, a very complex god, very, very hard to play, who has a notoriously low win rate for that reason, and Athena, who is pretty easy beginner character that is like really solid at low levels but falls off a lot at high levels, and like finding a way to kind of bring King Arthur down a little bit by either like reducing the challenge of certain aspects of his kit while not like actually decreasing the complexity of his kit. And for Athena, giving her more complex options, it was kind of like this nice push together.
Just a way to balance where it's not just, okay, well, let's just make that guy's damage numbers like double.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
let's triple his scaling, and then boom, he's going to be top tier.
Right. It's some of the changes.
It's finding something new.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these changes that we want to do that, we're new in a gameplay twist, such that even if we do need to nerf components of those characters next time, we might not necessarily nerf the new components because we want to see how those flexes feel, see if the new types of playstyles are more fun, and then therefore we can, nerf other components if necessary to round out the kit to allow for this new type of gameplay.
And it's been, I mean, from what I've played, really fun as well, right? And like the FG pit change as well is one that I think is, you never realize how much like, oh, hey, a geometry change.
Yeah,
like when you say it like that, it doesn't even sound that entertaining.
Sure.
And then you get in there and you're like, oh my God, this pit, like I feel so much more room. I can like, there's ways I can approach this that I never could see before.
I'm
it
glad
changes
that
so much.
I'm glad that really resonated because I mean that was a concern. It's like, okay, well, there's a lot of effort that goes into changes like this from the level design, from the environment standpoint. And when we were talking about it, I wanted to make sure that we didn't undersell it because it's hard to tell what the feel is going to be when you're just looking at it. But when you're playing it, it really does change things up. And the FG pit has never been this different. We said in season 0, it's been more closed off than ever with like the volcano. Now it's the most open it's ever been.
And it is more fun, I think. Like especially because we've had the match of the day that goes back to that old like just single entrance for the FG, and you can maybe have some nostalgia goggles for it, but when you're in there and you realize how many AoEs can just lock you in there and you're dead because of it, and it is
like
nice to
very first season 0 playtest, like the lava went up and I got Poseidon Kraken from the other side of the wall. I'm like, well, GG.
That's the other thing about the wall too, is you couldn't even see what was happening over them. So you get Kraken over the wall, Cuckoo ulted or anything like that, and you're like, I guess this just happened.
Yep, you're just I'm just dealing with it.
That's how it is.
I'm excited that, because the last season of Souls, like we did masters on it, but then a lot of like pro play was chill. I think we've got. Oh no, because this patch comes out Tuesday, right? So I'm unless we're playing on the current patch that's live now for some reason next week, we essentially got masters as competitive. Yeah. And then otherwise, by the time kickoff comes out, we'll be in the new season. So I'm excited to see what the new fire giant dances for these guys is going to look like.
And the new Stygian beacon loop and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially having more of those, knowing that you can get the Titans part 2.
Or even just the small thing of like uncapping the stack so it doesn't stop at 3.
Yeah.
That means that each one that you're missing is going to mean even more as the game goes on.
Yeah.
And suddenly, because it's not just, well, you know what, 2 on split, well, we'll take it, whatever. It's like, oh, well, 2 on split, but now they've got 3,
split, or
now it's 4. Oh no, it's starting to look like a totem counter on the other side. Yeah, you got to be a little more worried about it. I will say there are a couple people, and this is just shout outs, there's a lot of people who are like, hey, thumbs up the skins this patch, which just absolutely, and Lermy, I think you were talking about this, I guess it wasn't last week, but the last time we did this, but just the amount of work that goes into these skins, and like even specifically, I think the Medusa skin, the troubleshooting that can go into a skin like that, takes almost sometimes as long as getting the skin itself there.
Yeah, I mean, you would really be surprised at how long, or not necessarily like the amount of time, but how much effort goes into like T5 level skins. Like sometimes it is a complete reorganization of the rigging, which is just like you have to make a completely new character from scratch. Like it's God level, basically, when it comes down to it.
I think I'm trying to read the question as best as I can, but stats, I don't know if y'all would have this off the top of your head, but like did win rates during the gym event, like did they change any drastically? Normally, I guess there's so many games played that like a god usually is going to be in the spot they are for balance no matter what, because like you're pooling hundreds of games, but like did that bring in such an influx that you saw like some crazy variations anywhere?
Usually not for the small types of events.
Yeah.
Like, not that gem giveaways themselves aren't large, but like throughout the span of time, through the patches, you're usually going to see fluctuations due to the balance of that patch or the meta. Then you're going to see just
nothing that was outrageous compared to
even
normal.
Weekdays versus weekends, you see a little bit of a fluctuation. So really, it all averaged out to about the same, even though there were more people playing, which was always fun.
Yeah.
And that whole event in general was a lot of fun. Just seeing the random names that would pop up. It was like a roulette.
It made me really happy.
Skins actually can do it sometimes, depending on how popular the character is. If a new skin comes out,
oh really?
Like I think the easiest one to tell sometimes if a character is not already performing very well, but they might be popular, and a skin comes out, you see their win rate plummet because like all the people who weren't doing well just continue to like all the new amounts of population.
Yeah.
It's just going to make that win rate even worse and worse over time. So it's like, wait a second, why did that character just drop down 5%? It's like, oh, it's because their play rate went up by 5x, and yeah, they're not doing so hot.
A little bit of stress, and then like, okay, never mind. We see the numbers,
we
it makes sense. It makes sense. We can find balance, but then maybe like raises the subconscious, like, okay, wait, what can we do? What kind of changes? Like, if we're gonna make something spicy for that guy.
Exactly. Or sometimes you don't need to do such a large change. It's because you're looking at the population fluctuation. You can do a small one, and that can affect things pretty heavily.
And it's been fun, I think, like watching it. I know a lot of, I'm scrolling through, I see geometry changes again. The like shaman camps, spirit totems coming in, which at this point it feels like we're slightly rehashing maybe some content from yesterday and like discussions for it, but like,
oh sure,
I think the shaman camp spirit totems, for those bringing those in general, was that like an idea that was just we need something new for the season, or like is that something that's been kind of on the back burner? It'd be cool if these buffs could give like a sprinkling of something extra without being completely broken for the full like 180.
Yeah, I think like the original inspiration was like we were going back to figure out like what could we add to the map? What would be like a fun add?
Yeah.
And one thing that we had talked about was if you recall the scorpions and how they used to enhance buffs. We were like, well, we don't really have enhanced buffs anymore, but we were like, we don't really want to just bring it back as it was, because that's just a little like same, but rehashing it into this kind of new really flexible system feels so much fun. And again, like being able to make that choice is just such a cool little micro play that you can do depending on the matchup, depending on the order that you get them, which is honestly one of the most underrated awesome parts about that is that every game's going to feel different because you're getting a different order of the shaman camps.
Yep.
And I had a lot of fun just like being able to choose, and like most of the time it's one of those things that like realistically when I'm running down, am I really thinking, oh man, I got this little bit of extra movement speed because I added that to my buff? Like, not really, but it feels good, and that's really what matters the most.
Yeah.
And so it's been, I think, really fun, like from top to bottom, just what these have been able to give, and like having in my mind like the extra pin, which I think comes in handy dramatically in late game, but like choosing that, it's another thing that looking at SPL, I'm really excited to see.
I'm
like,
very curious to see
which beacon, or not beacon, which totem mask that you're going for.
I was definitely already seeing that in like the PTS games. People were trying to like min-max. Well, I'm going to go like, and also with the new recipes, like, okay, I'm going to go the gooseberries, which means I'm going to get a little bit of the attack speed early until I get to like a critical massive attack speed, in which case I'm going to switch that to like the health one, because that scales a little bit later on into the late game. I'm like, seeing that thought process is always really interesting. And I think the important part for both of these features is that it's a little bit more of like a min-max opt-in situation. If you're a casual player and you don't really want to think about it, you just choose the one that's best for you and you double up on the totem, and you're going to be in a happy spot anyways. It's not really going to harm your gameplay as much as like not buying a relic or something like that would do.
Yeah, exactly.
And it honestly, it's just a fun little gameplay mechanic in there. I did notice, and Lermy, I'm going to address this to you because I was playing Yu Huang on the PTS a couple hours ago, and it did not, I had to like puzzle out the way I hit my totems because I'd hit one and the auto would then proc to the next totem.
No way.
And so I'd be like, oh, I want yellow, and I'd hit yellow and it'd go blue, and I'd sit there and I'd go, no, I want yellow, and it'd go blue again. And I'd watch the flame bounce around. I'm like, okay, come on. And I got there. I figured it out. It was a fun little mini game for me to play in the jungle.
We could look into.
It was really fun though, because like it is, at least that part of it was very entertaining. But it is fun to like then choose, I really want red. I really want like a double red here or something. I really want like extra attack speed. I really want X, Y, and Z. And so it feels like the stats are going to be really fun, and like I said, I'm curious what roles are going to choose what for each buff, and then on top of that, if there's one that like reigns supreme maybe across all the others.
And in which case we'll nerf it.
I know right now, saw someone in chat say, are these patch notes? To kind of, but you can just ask questions. Like that's what they're here for. And that's kind of what I'm waiting for. I'm just throwing out whatever comes to mind while I scroll down waiting for the biggest one. I saw like, is the Salt Tourney going to be played on both patches? It should be on 10.9 because I think it's just going to be on live servers. But that's not really patch oriented, so that's...
Yeah.
Is there anything that stands out to you? Like, I know, because like going into a patch, there's always like this one where we're maybe a little worried about. Is there anything like this one that you were like, that's the one we want to keep our eye on the most?
I'm going to say the thing that, it's like a maybe I should say. Yeah, there was something that we definitely wanted to keep our eye on that we were definitely scared about that we ended up cutting. So.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
and I'm not going to say more than that.
And you know what? And without getting into it, it does go back to something we had, I think, the last time we did this. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, which is that ideas in Smite, which I think much like, the totems, you had said, like, kind of coming back as a rehash of the enhanced buffs that we saw from the Scorpions. There are things in Smite and ideas that recur but get changed every now and then as they come back.
Evolutions of them.
And so just keep eyes, like, that's happening in every patch.
One could argue that the recipes are like a different revision and a different inspiration of both starter items and blessings. And, we've always played around with ideas of these and wanted to find just what's the next best version of what this could be.
So were y'all just really hungry for the recipe? Like, when you were coming up with the recipes, like, what made it recipes and, like, gooseberries, stew, bao? Like, how did that come around?
We were in a meeting. This is so funny because I remember we were... Aggro's in the car.
Aggro's in the car. Yeah, I was gonna hope you said this. Yeah, Aggro's in the car.
And so we were talking about, okay, we have these like quest things, but like, what can you do with quests? Like, what kind of items in Smite would make sense? And we were like, oh, maybe it's like some kind of pantheon theme. Maybe it's like a mythical creature theme. But we already kind of did that with the earrings. But what about food?
Yep.
What about food? What about a recipe?
Yep, there are steps that you're going to keep going through and make sense. And then we were talking about the different types. I was insistent from the very beginning that I wanted dumplings or bao. And then...
and you got them.
He said there had to be.
There had to be dumplings or bao. That had to be a thing. And then we got to the alliteration components of it, which we talked about a little bit yesterday. And then Bountiful Bao was like tossed around as an idea, and I said, "That lock it in. That's happening.
That's happening.
I love that. I want that to happen." Then we had to go back to a couple of the other ones to make sure the alliteration fit well, and that's obviously the most important part of our job is to make sure that the items
alliteration.
Yes.
And I still remember. I don't know. I can't remember if it was just a comment that Ryan said or the fact we could hear his wife in the car basically go like, "What are you doing in your meetings, guys? What is this? Is this your job, really?" And I'm like, yeah, it's the most important part of our job.
It was a bit of a stink post day, you might say.
Yeah. Someone in chat says literally cooking in Smite.
Cooking. Yeah, I mean, once the idea, it's like one of those things that you hear, and this can happen with like God ideas or bounce ideas, whatever. It's like once everyone just like vibes with something instantly, it's a winner.
Yep.
Yeah.
As soon as someone like we got to the idea of food, it's just like this just everything fits, right? Like
everyone
these are quest steps, these are things. We haven't done food as an item type in the game. We want to make sure that like it fits. It's the new type of the ambrosia of the gods.
Now I kind of want to know, for each of these, like which came first. So for Bountiful Bao, it sounds like Bao came first, right?
Yeah.
So you knew you wanted Bao, and then Bountiful was the
right.
Well,
let's get it some alliteration.
Was that the first one though?
No. The first item itself was the idea of what if we brought like Golden Bow back.
Yeah.
That was the first idea.
Okay.
And we didn't do any of the quest steps. We started from the final dishes themselves. So all the steps were kind of irrelevant. It was if we want to hit one of each class archetype, we want to make sure that there's something for everyone. And that's why we said yesterday as well. It's like, sure, the gooseberries make sense for hunters, but it also makes sense for basic attack warriors and basic attack mages. We want to make sure we hit the archetypes and not always just the classes.
Yeah.
So we worked on what's the best version of these dishes first, and then we worked into the types of these.
What I like is because of the way you describe it, it does sound like if we take away like the class and the hunter speak, like everything you just said sounds like a chef.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what makes it real
And then
fun.
you just want to add the spice on top, and then the garnish, and you got to plate it well, and it all comes together.
And then you can send it.
That was the funny thing though, is like we were like, okay, if this is gonna be Golden Bow, then it has to be golden something, right? And then
at first I don't know if it was, but then and then absolutely lashed
because we were like, oh well, do we want it to be like actually bring back Golden Bow, or do we want it to be kind of like disguised as something?
I actually remember the first one that was there because I kept it was Party Punch.
Oh,
because I had an idea for Party Punch for something completely different.
Oh, really?
It was like the voodoo celebration. That's the most like voodoo celebratory, right? Just like Party Punch just felt correctly, like whether it's. Okay, gotta watch. Gotta watch what was
live censorship that we just saw.
Really, that was. I think all of us here know what I was about to say, kind of. But yes, I wanted to make sure that they're all on theme, and I'm gonna shut up just in case.
Well, and no, I'm not going to. If I read the comment, that would give even more of a hint to what we just saw live censored, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I am curious naming-wise, though, because I think naming convention, it sounds like you wanted food, and the minute food came up, you wanted Bao. And so what, like when you tacked on bountiful, I'm curious, like, you know, was sturdy first, and then you were like, well, what goes with sturdy? Stew?
So we were
It was
thinking,
the opposite,
like,
I would say.
What's like a hearty
Yeah,
food?
exactly.
Like,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I think,
that
I
was
think
the
it
thought
was
process.
hearty stew first. I think that was the name of
Yeah.
it before it became sturdy stew. Yeah.
Because
And then-
we were thinking like kind of thematically, like what makes sense for like tanks to get. Like tanks
Yep,
want
yep.
something
Yep.
meaty. They want
Oh,
something
yeah.
hearty.
Bacchus kind of already has that kind of like, you know, turkey leg kind of vibe going on.
Which explains like where the drumstick maybe
Drumstick
came from.
in. Sorry, yeah. I think those were slightly interchangeable for us, but then that came as a hearty stew kind of made more sense for that versus the durable drumsticks, which, you know, something you would smack someone with like a bludgeon.
Yeah. People were saying in my chat last night that Bacchus already has durable drumstick and party punch, so he should just get them for free. And I honestly agree.
They may. That's a fair
Sorry,
point. He's kind of
you can only have one recipe one time. Even Bacchus isn't excited.
Now, I'm going to ask this one more from a place of ignorance than anything else, which is, are gooseberries a real food?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
What is a gooseberry?
It's a type of berry.
Now I've got to look it up. I've never seen or heard of a
type of berry.
gooseberry.
I don't know how necessarily tasty they are.
this-
Oh, they're like, oh, wow. And y'all nailed it. Like, those are
The
pretty
item art
golden
looks-
as far as they are. Huh.
Yep.
I wonder what a gooseberry tastes like. Now I'm going to be thinking about that. They don't,
a piece.
I'm going to be honest, it does not look like something I personally want to eat.
Be worth a try,
Okay,
maybe.
okay. But that is a piece of content that we should make. Is we should do making recipes IRL.
Yeah, exactly.
Make the recipe. I want to see, Lermy, your next stream. It's
Oh,
making a
yeah,
sturdy
yeah.
stew.
Hey, we don't really have.
Listen, I've never.
I got the bow.
You're the bow guy. It just has to be
I
you.
might need help with from Skilladon.
And of course, at that point, you don't have to make the party punch. I think the party punch is prevalent through the series while you make the rest of them.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's the
yes.
first thing.
The good news is,
They're very sour. I do think gooseberries might be sour.
man,
I think I remember. I think I've had a gooseberry before, and I think it was sour.
does it change if they're golden? And
Probably tastes like metal.
I'm impressed with the again, knowing that now I've seen what an actual gooseberry looks like, and I'm looking at the art. That nailed it. Which I guess I don't know why I would have second guessed that. I just thought they were
really
imaginary.
yummy. They're pretty big from there. I feel like I remember being like kind of like sour with like a hint of sweetness, but I might be making it up.
Yeah, I saw they're very sour. Bought them once, ate them raw, didn't taste good, and then immediately very yummy. We do have a question though, an actual from chat question, which
It's
again,
like our balance, like
if
sour, pretty good at it once, really good, really yummy.
if you want to get your question asked, just throw it in chat.
Yeah, it's
while you're here.
Sonics.
It is Young Sonics. So has the team ever considered looking at gods like Ardeo, Cthulhu, and Yorm, and how to be able to play them in the support role, or like if you want them to stay exclusively solo, stuff like that?
I mean, they kind of were designed for solo. At least Cthulhu and Yorm were.
They're all
if I'm not
definitely
mistaken.
bruiser characters for sure, all three of them. I think Artio probably has the most flex, right? She's
Yeah.
kind of literally she's the shapeshifter. She's got one that's a little bit more supportive. She's got one that's a little bit more bruiser. Itemization plays a big role to them, but I do think that's true. Like all three of those gods, for the most part, especially Cthulhu and Yorm, having worked on both of those, were designed to be bruiser characters. That at the time of their release, if they were hallmarked and featured in the support lane, would have been kind of the incorrect way to play them.
Yeah.
That's not to say that metas can change and philosophies for characters can change, but I would say that if I were to want to see them back first in like the SPL or in a competitive setting or in a more balanced setting, I'd want to see them first in the solo lane, then in the support lane, then in the jungle. It's like, then wherever you want it to be.
Yeah, I guess Artie is like the only exception, right? And I feel like the biggest
Yeah, she
reason
bounces
that
between both.
She is played in solos because she is a stance switcher, right? So she can clear waves, whereas like
Yup.
your other traditional supports that like have very similar damage levels to her and CC levels, they just can't clear the wave. I'm thinking like Sobek has a really hard time, and he used to be a staple. Xing Chen used to be a staple. They just don't really keep up in terms of clear compared to Ardeo, and that's why she gets played over there, even though she has like very similar levels of CC compared to them.
And I think, kind of touching on what you had said, like there was like a big argument, like Ardeo falls in the line.
Yeah.
But when Cthulhu came out, there were like 2 or 3 people who were adamant. Cthulhu support. That's where he's going to be. It's where he's going to be his best.
People
And they
buy it.
lost every single game they played. Whereas Cthulhu in solo was just bodying people at the time.
I love watching some of the content creators or whoever they may be, and like they'll have their specific role and they'll play a new character and they'll play it first in that role, and then they may or may not do so well because it's a flex role,
Yeah.
and then they'll make like their determinations or like their things on that role, and they'll be like, yeah, maybe you try the role is more so designed for, and then
Yeah, this new
like that
mage,
with Karen,
garbage
too.
solo laner.
It's like that with Charon too, where it was
yeah
like
yeah.
people really wanted him to work in solo, and he's just more built for
A lot of Charon jungle truthers out there,
Yeah,
too.
I don't know what
what's
that's
up. I
about.
think Shelly's one of them.
Jungle truthers.
Listen.
Good point.
He was really good when he came out, and you could just gank people with the rocket because they didn't know what was coming because he was brand new. So, having been there for his development, you kind of have the months of advantage of knowing what to look out for. It's a little bit of a...
Now we have Apollo everywhere meta.
Apollo everywhere. And that's, that's what we really needed. I mean, we were already, like, the last time competitively that I saw Apollo, and it was a serious lock-in, was in the jungle of all things.
Yeah.
And
that
was
a
it
thing for a
adapting?
while.
Johnny.
Johnny,
Johnny
it was one
played
of
it
them,
in the
right?
jungle. And I don't think he won, but he did do it, and that's what matters, really, is that it's getting locked
In a non-meme game, yeah.
Posh Tendo wants to know, what are the devs' thoughts on Mulan?
Pretty cool character, if you ask me.
And now,
No
Clumsy,
bias.
let's dive into that. Why would you think maybe that Mulan's a really cool character?
I like the way that you can kind of choose the skill expression via the passive to train different skills.
She is very fun, though. Like, in all seriousness, the lane, my experience with Mulan is mostly against it, and it was mainly because whenever we got put against each other, if me and Dave got thrown into solo lane, I would play Bologna, he would play Mulan. And there were times we would go through two different iterations. Either neither of us were going to kill the other guy, unless the jungler showed up, in which case we would put in an effort for them, or we were going to try really hard, and he would body me because his Mulan, for some reason, was really good. His Mulan, his Ganesh were very, very solid. Put him on most other gods, and it's, much better balance.
Whoa, he's not even here to defend himself.
I'll text him. I'll call him right now. He's at work. But I'll just say, hey, man, how good are you at Smite? And he'll just go, not great.
Mulan was an interesting one, though, because there were lessons kind of learned or adapted to from her release. Mulan was probably one of the most balanced releases I ever worked on ever. I think she released within 50, 50.05 to or somewhere around there.
Wow.
But that's one of the lessons that we learned in terms of it's not always, and I'm excited to see how everyone else takes this. But it's what we say, characters on release, if they're perfectly balanced, that's not always a good thing. In the competitive setting, players almost, I talked to several of the pros that I'm good friends with, and the people who would want to play her, and they're like, we don't have an excuse to play her, because if you're just good, you're not offering enough, right?
Yeah.
If you're, and this is not just a win rate thing, if you're just good at everything you do, or just good at a very specific time in the game, we rather play someone that really excels at a specific point or specific time or a specific meta, because that's what it's more important right now, which just caused us to get a lack of data of what people are the lack of reception. People both didn't say that she was too good or too bad. We just left her be for a little while, and she kind of fell into irrelevancy at the start of her career. And it's well, not only is that a poor reception for a god, it's just unfortunate that a balanced approach to kind of character release is just one that gives us the least information. Because maybe down the line there are weaknesses or there are strengths, but not knowing that early on actually hurts the development of that character. And it's one of those things that also the social mentality of characters is that if they are strong, they're overpowered. If they're balanced, they're very strong. And if they're weak, they're balanced. That's how every god is released.
Yeah.
So, with that mentality in mind, if we release a character that's at least a little bit strong, and we can go into PTS, we can go into the first bonus bounce and nerf them afterwards, which is generally meeting player perception, we get still the best amount of data. And that's what it's about. It's not just about releasing characters that are strong for any particular reason. It's that way we can get a better understanding of how those characters are going to be received and balance them accordingly, upwards or downwards.
And it's goes back to every sort of statistics that you would ever, the bigger the sample size, the better it is for you. You understand more. 5 games and it's she's got an 8 or 60% win rate, and you're like, well, she won 3 of them.
Yeah,
cool,
exactly.
That's great. That doesn't mean anything for us.
Yeah. I mean, even on an individual psychology level, right? If you are picking up a character for the first time and they, aren't making sense, aren't doing the things that you want them to do, they don't feel like they are winning, right? They don't feel like they are the new, shiny, brand new, fun thing to do, then they're just not going to go and play it again, right? So I want to make something that gives you that advantage while you're still learning, because that's another part that you didn't really touch on, is that players are getting something that they've never had a chance to play with before, so they have no idea what to do. And that's the same thing with all of our testers internally, is we usually say, hey, it's this person's first time on the new god, let's give them a little bit of space, whatever it might be, to figure out what they're doing.
Yep.
And that is generally to keep that feedback positive and constructive at the same time.
That's the first 7 minutes that I was playing Charon. I was just I don't know how I feel about this guy. I just don't get it. What's going on? And then something clicked at level 8. And then suddenly I was like, oh, I'm playing him wrong. And then the rest of the game was fun from that point forward. Like it was literally just kind of like, okay, I can see like what you're going for. Oh, clicks. And that's, I think, a perfect example of that. Is like, sometimes you need that little bit of like, what am I supposed to do to make this work?
Just a little bit of time, a little bit of room.
To sum up where we are now, I believe Mulan's actually in a fine spot. She kind of fluctuates in and out of the meta. After we did the ultimate changes where she could cancel in between, that really helped her out a lot. She then found some time where she needed a few buffs. But I believe where she is now, she's probably back to a decently balanced perspective where she's not absolutely stomping games, which is probably why you're not seeing her a lot. But people who enjoy playing her still pick her up because her popularity hasn't dipped too low either. So I would say definitely one of those characters where if you like playing her and you're scared, like, or if you're scared, just go for it because she's not going to lose you any games. But if you're trying to play Grandmaster's ranked, you're probably going to have to be a meta slave.
Yeah, you're gonna be stuck. There's a certain point you're just stuck playing whatever everybody else is playing. Cute casuals though, that's a secret.
Or just play Anubis solo.
Or just play Anubis solo.
Actually, Hades solo still actually like secret fire. But
Lermy's like, yeah, if you see my name in the lobby and you're on my team,
you stress me out. Listen. Unless your name is Solo or Troll, Haddix, any of those guys.
Literally Solo or Troll.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Tanks are good. Tanks are really strong.
Tanks are really strong. Well, I know we have a question queued up, so we can just go ahead and take a peek-see at it. Osiris buff seems focused for jungle. Was that the intention? Or there maybe further plans for him?
I mean, it doesn't really change his jungle.
Yeah,
that much.
I was going to say, being able to fire your sickle through the entire minion wave is incredibly strong in the lane. I think we wanted to make sure there was two things. We wanted to make sure that his laning experience wasn't completely hampered by the fact that his laning experience is actually pretty tough. I mentioned that on the patch notes shows, like you're incentivized to level up the 1. Your 2 doesn't really group up the entire minions unless you're doing that yourself, which is fine. You have your double cleave, but all of those together doesn't make for the easiest laning experience. This makes it a little bit easier without making it too brain dead, especially with the 50% damage reduction. And then 2 was to just play on the fact that he's a basic attack warrior. And now that I can see leaning him in the fact that might be helping him in the jungle, because Osiris has been one of those gods where you do see him flex into the jungle.
Yeah.
That's fine. We don't have a problem with that. We wanted to play up on the fact that he is a basic attack warrior. Those were the changes that we made for him.
Yes.
And I played those one of those weeks. It feels way better when you're able to, like, it adds depth to the lane that Osiris just didn't have before, because like you said, like, well, either I can't group them up, so either I gotta let you clear and then I gotta take some poke while I set this up so I can hit him with my 2,
as a character that has no sustain,
or I gotta like just kind of walk in and hit and hope you don't hit me with your abilities while I'm trying to get in and melee and use my cleaves. Or I'll just sit back and cry for a little while, but and then I'll hit late game and I'll be Osiris and yay, happy time.
Exactly. It's really about minimizing the challenge while still keeping the complexity.
Yeah.
Because before, Osiris was supposed to level the 1. The 1 doesn't go through minions at that point, right?
No.
So if you mess that up, that's the wave.
Have fun.
That's the wave. You're done. You lost your wave pressure.
I think it was actually around Mulan time where I was never really good at Osiris, and people were like, Osiris is always the biggest lane bully, like, especially around then. It's like, what you're meant to do is you level up the 1 and you don't attack the minion.
Yeah, no, you just
attack the other person. I'm like, this is like, oh. It's like, okay. And then once they're low and they're driven back, then you go clear the minions. I'm like, I'm a bit surprised that this just works. Like, all right.
Yeah, the different solo lane. Like, I feel like I grew up in a solo lane that was like, you know what, we're both gonna farm. We're over here for a little while.
It was more respectful.
And then like it's like if I solo you, then like that's just because I'm better.
Yeah.
But that's it. But now it's like we're just gonna beat each other up and then see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. People want that aggressive gameplay, and that's totally fine.
And you know what? It's been fun to watch, and I'm excited to see if Osiris like changes anything.
Yeah.
Obviously not like too drastic, but like I'm really
it certainly will make
interested.
him better. That's for sure.
Yeah,
It's just he had a lot of room to go up.
First pick, first ban. That's a different conversation.
We'll see.
If he comes back though, man, it was like Osiris Erlong was that meta. I'm happy that he got a change that Erlong didn't get, so that they can stay like separate from each other for a little while. It wasn't like their items or anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's a separate conversation. The basic attack warriors as a whole have been suffering a little bit. We saw some buffs to Bologna before. We saw some buffs to Osiris and into Amma in this patch. That's something that we talked about on the patch notes show, something we want to be careful of. But yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said about like if all of them are good all at the same time, then we've probably overshot that mark.
Yeah. You got to find I guess the right balance, right? That's I know we had a second question that was.
That's what the segment should be called, the right balance.
The right balance.
We could just end. We could just like find a time to slip that in.
It says
that's some dev insight, right?
Dev insight. How How's Opwash doing these days? Always viewed him as the laughing stock of Smite. Man, it could have just been how's
like a
Opwash
clown
doing?
skin?
He just seems like okay, but no, the laughing stock.
I like his
He's
pumpkin
like
skin.
he's decent, right? Like he's okay across the board. In Assault, he is the most winningest character I think you could ever possibly have on your team. He is just the best character to get in Assault, period. He's pretty good in Arena, I'd say, across the board, among all levels, right? He's not the most challenging character in the world, but he's not a safe character by any means, right?
Yeah, I think he's actually just kind of tough. He does his job well. He has decent bursts. He's got decent like zone control, especially with his ultimate. So, you know, some of those characters where you're playing off of your team as much as you're playing off of yourself, and that's always going to be a bit tougher. He does also bring the most anti-heal out of any character in the game. We've preserved the fact that two of his abilities anti-heal and stack with one another. So there is a very distinct purpose or a niche for him if you want to build him that way. Could he use some love? Maybe, but we do also have, like, if we did, like Lermy said, we kind of need to puff conquest buffs with non-conquest nerfs.
He already has the biggest
With
non-conquest
more,
nerfs, yes, and he still has like a 70-something% win rate in some of these other modes.
That one's always been really fun looking at, especially because like when you added non-conquest balance, first off, insane on your part just because of all the extra work that comes in. But it was always crazy, and the reason it got added was because you'd get, you know, gods like the Opwashes or the Zeuses, like where it's like, hey, outside of conquest, they're like just destroying everyone. The minute you put them into like the quote unquote main game mode or whatever, the primary, whatever you want to call it, they're awful. They don't get anything done, and trying to balance that was a nightmare.
Yeah, I had that same question, like I think last week with Nuwa. It's like, oh, why did Nuwa get the non-conquest nerfs? Or like nerfs at all? And the reason why is because in conquest you don't see her very much, but in non-conquest she's actually doing quite well.
And she's very popular.
Yeah, and she's very popular, which makes the fact that she does well like exponential.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's tough sometimes balancing between the conquest and the non-conquest because it feels a bit off sometimes when you're going from the same that same character in one game to another, and then their power level is going to be different, so you can't really fully understand that the cooldowns might be at a different scale. But I think it's still healthier for the different player bases. Separately,
especially because you've got your arena assault like joust mains, and then like your conquest mains. Like there's the people that jump around, but like there's a lot of people in Smite that also like they want to stay in their own lane and they're doing their own thing,
and they shouldn't need to suffer together. So that's okay.
Yeah, and that way, and the other way, at least I look at it, is that it makes more gods more viable across the board because of that kind of.
And I'm going to jump to that. The latest question I saw is, do we really care that much about balance in arena? And the answer is, yeah, we do, and that's why we implemented the conquest and non-conquest balances, because previously we couldn't care about the balance in arena, but. That's why whenever we talk about things like class roles and their flexibility and the role flex, that's conquest specific. But there are other game modes that are out there, whether it's Joust, whether it's Slash, whether it's Arena, whatever it may be, and Assault. The vast majority of our players are playing other game modes that aren't just Conquest. Conquest is a premier and a hallmark feature, and we want to care about the integrity and the balance of that game mode, but we can't just ignore everyone else. That's just not responsible.
And it's not even like an everyone else thing, too. There are Conquest players that play the other modes, too.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing for everybody.
I mean, look at, like, I'm going to use Barracuda as an example because he comes in, plays pro, Conquest is focused on like all those balance, that's what matters, and then you watch his stream, he's playing only Assault, like, and that's just like, if he's gonna play Smite at home, he's gonna relax because he's spent 6 hours in a scrim already that day and 2 hours theory crafting. He wants to relax on it.
Obviously, like we said before, we want to stem everything with a little bit of expectation, a little bit of salt, so just like we don't want to drive them to be two separate games, right? Like there is a balance point where if we just keep shifting Conquest and non-Conquest to be so obscene, you just have Zeus Arena, Zeus Conquest, and there might as well just be different characters.
At that point.
And that's not valuable. That's a lot tougher. But also we have to care about items and stuff like that. Sure, we have some banned items, but if we start splitting everything, like you said, we would need to hire an entirely separate.
Yeah, you literally have Conquest design team, everybody else design team.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask this one just because it caught my eye. Of the spicy god changes coming in this patch, which one is your favorite?
Ooh, that is so tough.
That's tough.
That's so tough.
The first one that we worked on was Kabrakan, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
was it the first one or was Athena the first one?
Oh yeah, I guess was the first. Kabrakan was the second, and I was excited about those. I guess I was excited more for Kabrakan because it was a little bit more of a gameplay shift. Although we started adding more to Athena's and fleshing that out a little bit more, which I thought made it a lot more interesting. But I don't want to end up going through all of them, but I think the two that got to me a little bit more so as we were working on them was like we got the Pele one working, and that was really exciting. It's like that's like a gameplay shift that really does change the way you're going in and out of team fights.
That implementation was really interesting too, just like on like an actual technical level. Was like because the way that our like system works is that we have a very specific setup, which is like this does this, and these are connected here. But when you add an entirely new part, sometimes it doesn't work like you always expect it to. So being able to like have that flexibility and kind of finagle these parts into places where they were not originally supposed to be and making it work is like one of the most fun parts about this job. Yeah.
And then, I mean, I'm still smiling about it because I don't care how irrelevant or irrelevant it is. We made the drummer drum, and Raijin just like making him just care about attack speed because the care that like that's part of his theme. Like we're not flexing him to be a basic attack mage. That's not the goal. But I think we learned a pretty. I learned a pretty heavy lesson, or a small lesson, honestly, when we buffed out Agni's base attack speed back in the day, because that plays was this passive. That ended up being a really good buff. It was different. It was a tangent to what his kit is, but it still played a really big component to what he's trying to do and how he gains his passive stacks. And like we saw a good surgeons and behind the scenes we saw like that really move the dial. And some of those things like, well, it's thematic, it helps him out. And same thing for Raijin. It's like, well, just let him drum, let him do some fun stuff. It plays on his passive, makes that a little bit more exciting. Plays on like the same ulti things that we did with Serket and Giannis, and it's just like a fun new thing. It's not going to be the way you play him. It might be. I played basic attack Raijin. It doesn't suck. You know?
Batman right all those years ago.
All those years ago.
Just like so, I think those two might be my favorites.
Yeah, I think I'm on the Athena train, to be honest with you, because for the longest time the feedback on Athena is yes, she's fun, yes, she's good, but she's not flexible. She does one thing, and that's about it. She taunts, and she puts down her 3, and her 3 just does damage. And for the longest time,
usually once,
perception was this is the worst ability in the game, and I go, it's hard to defend it sometimes because it is just damage, and that's it. 2 damage.
2 damage.
And so we were like, well,
did they not wave back?
In here. No, why didn't you just get him in here and just?
I didn't even know he was here. If I'm honest with you.
Here, what the heck?
And I was about to inflate his ego accidentally because I was going to say at least like
open
mine.
The door and grab him.
I'm always a big fan of like Maui changes, mainly because these ones buff me and I like playing Maui. I feel like the unfortunate thing about the longevity of some gods being around is that I hit my hooks less now because they know to expect it better.
Yep, that's
people
true.
have they've learned how to deal with it.
I mean, that's always the interesting thing. Like I think Lermy kind of brushed upon this topic earlier when we were talking about new gods and when they come out. It's like you always see like the learning curve. Generally, gods get better the first like few days after their release. But sometimes you'll see like that, and then it'll fluctuate back downwards as people get used to playing against them.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, well, that's like it's like that fight between the community base and the populator of those gods and the mirror match. It's like which way does that go and how severe does it go?
That happens in like playtests too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, where it's like we have a brand new god that is in progress, right? So they might not have all of their animations or effects or timings or whatever it might be. It might not be complete, and we just have to test at that time because that's just our schedule. We need to get information and like have that development process continue. So when players would come back and they say, I couldn't react to this, basically, it's like a common thing that comes up, and we say, well, that's totally understandable, but is it the timing or is it what's not there yet?
Yeah.
So we have to kind of assess that. Or is it also that they're a brand new character that you've never played against before and don't know what they do?
Yeah, like, I mean, there are people, I'm going to use Najah as an example because Najah's old as hell. And
love Najah.
You, at this point, high level, everybody can beat the ult. Everybody, like, and it feels like it happened.
You say that.
And then you see, like, me,
and
exactly. I get hit by it all the time.
I do too.
And so it's just like,
even like increase the delay, and I'm like, how am I still getting hit by this?
Yeah, and it was so interesting because, like, I think that was a point, there was a conversation about that, like, with the pros who were just like, yeah, it's too easy to beads it. And it's just like, no, trust me, it's not. You're just real good at Smite, my guy. It's always interesting to see that. I also want to give because it's a shout out to you guys, it was just a W devs caring about their entire player base. So,
heck yeah.
Bravo. I clap. Now there's a lot of questions pouring through, and I'm having to figure out which ones we want to pick forward. Also because I haven't read them. Instead, I've been too invested in the conversation, so I haven't been paying as much attention to maybe chat that Maybe I should. I see some questions maybe about the new Odyssey. I actually want to ask. Apollo was my other favorite change. I forgot.
Oh yeah,
I was like, why am I stopped on Apollo?
Apollo was the first hunter we worked on, and yeah, we definitely gave him a lot of love.
Was Apollo first or was Chernobog first?
I thought it was
Apollo.
Apollo.
Might have been Chernobog. I don't know. No, it might have been the same time.
Don't look at me.
Apollo.
Come on, man, help us out here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we might have had one idea for Churn. This is my thinking. I have no idea if this is accurate. I think we had one idea for Churn, did Apollo, then came back to Churn. Maybe that's somewhere worth.
Maybe something like that because we definitely.
I'm not going to go back to look at the revision history. So I'm just going to trust what I did next.
Okay, we want to do Apollo and Chernobog, and then from there we picked one. I guess.
Gotcha.
I do know though, and maybe it's just because launch tournament. Which I guess, did you play at launch tournament? Now that I'm thinking back to that.
So I actually get confused a lot. Which was the one where the Fat Chunks Assemble was in?
That would have been. Or
was that the cognitive tournament? That might have been with the one with was it even?
Yeah, that might have been Worlds 1.
No, that was before Worlds, but that's the one where I was actually there. I was there as the coach for Fat Chunks Assemble. I don't think I was actually there for launch tournament unless it was the same thing. I'm trying to think. Well,
I know Pon definitely played at launch tournament. Yes. I remember that because he was on Denial.
Was that on the Side Jungles Conquest map?
No, that was on the.
I played right after that.
I think the first iteration of the map after that.
Maybe chat will remember.
And more specifically, the only reason I'm bringing that up is because Youngbei played a lot of Apollo, and so I think Apollo has always had a place in my head because I remember watching it on the stage, and that just stood out to me.
Apollo has a place in my head too because he was the skin for SMITE card.
He was the skin for SMITE card. He even has the racing.
Yeah, I wasn't going to force the topic or the conversation.
And you know what? I mean, while we're talking about it,
it is right there.
It's weird how every question now that's coming in is when does SMITE card come back? When are we getting the SMITE card spinoff? Everybody loves.
Hey, Lermy, add ranked SMITE card. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, it's really man.
I'm just reading chat.
Yeah, it's ranked SMITE card.
Not what.
Oh, okay, right. My bad.
Lermy, we might need to get your glasses checked. That definitely says ranked SMITE card.
I can't see.
See, look, she even admitted it. We already know. I think we had another question queued up, which is way better than me looking for it, which I guess kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which we've discovered gooseberries, either tasty, maybe sour, maybe a little sweet, but also how did the return of that item concept of, the golden bow from Days of Yore find its way back to golden gooseberries?
I think our first thought was we want to do something early game focused because Titans we're mid to late game. I mean, you could consider late game about that time. So they were late game focused. We're okay, opposite of late game, early game, easy peasy. Let's do something early game focused to just bring it as different as possible, really, from those two things. And we were let's ground whatever we're doing in the early game. Mm-hmm. So we were what are some early game rewards that aren't terrifyingly broken? And you may go, well, Golden Blade is that, or Golden Bow is that. And, you would be correct for Golden Bow. But that's why we changed it to be different, to have no stats, to be a reduced range. There are so many numbers that we can play with that the effect doesn't have to die because the numbers were scary.
Yeah. I think Golden Bow in its last iteration that existed live and stuff like that, there was a world where it could have been good. I still remember playing Cupid with Golden Bow and it's oh, this feels good now. I have another method of clearing and something like that, right? It's it's something that you can flex into to help out. It's something that you didn't need to if your wave clear was good enough. But the stats, and in the early iteration, I can't remember what the last iteration, but the early iteration I think had crit as well. Yep. It's well,
that's what I was thinking.
Maybe those two things shouldn't exist at the same time, right? So by removing the crit, removing the stats out of it, this effect, and we can see it with Golden Blade, does work out. And Golden Blade itself is a crutch at times. It's something that you may not want to have, and this is one way of breaching the topic. Is we definitely asked. It's is there a world where Golden Blade doesn't exist? Is gooseberries a better version of Golden Blade? But we didn't want to just remove one with the other. We definitely thought about it because we weren't entirely sure how the meta would play out. Right? If gooseberries didn't really hit that mark, if the timing period that you needed Golden Blade for was just several minutes earlier, then maybe it just wouldn't feel as good. And we definitely tried both of them together, and I've been watching the PTS and they've tried that as well, and it doesn't work that well. It's much better to maybe get Party Punch or something else that can help round out your kit, so that we felt safe there. But maybe there's a world where if we can iterate on gooseberries and get the timing right and people prefer not having an actual item for it, maybe this just works out better. So it's I think it's just kind of seeing the best versions of these effects.
You just gave me flashbacks, by the way, to when Mercury ADC was a big deal because Golden Bow had crit on it, and it was worked. I can just throw his one out there, clear a full wave, and crit the enemy.
And cleave
let's go for it. Why would I not do this in the duo lane?
Yep.
sometimes, you know what? Those are fun memories, and they should stay memories. And that's where they're going to sit. I see someone specifically. I think it was Exiled Beauty who had asked the favorites of your spicy changes. They said I still miss boots.
I don't.
And this is not a translation
what do
into
you
a
mean?
question.
You still have boots.
Yeah, you can still wear them, actually, as it turns out. I wanted to ask, like, you just said you don't. Has that, like, do boots ever come up, like, as a fond memory for you guys? Or is, like, that was, like, one of the best decisions you ever made? You're happy they're gone?
I was really excited for the removal of boots. I mean, we attempted it with, right? Speed Elixir was, like, our trial to see what that would feel like. And for me, it was just, like, a successful, it seems so small, but it's like a successful iteration on like the movement of a MOBA in a way. It's like boots is the staple. Like removing boots was almost a little bit scary just because other people from other MOBAs come with the knowledge that boots is what you get really, really early on.
Yeah.
And it helps with the power curve and stuff like that. But the way that SMITE was moving, like, you know, we wanted to see whether it was a necessity and, you know, solving build flexibility and stuff like that. If people remember, there's a world where you had less than 6 items because boots was a necessity. That's
guaranteed.
just lame, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that we've moved away from that is really, really exciting. And obviously the constant balance back and forth of whether you want to get this boot or that boost of Warrior Tabby and Ninja Tabby, and this helps that build and this helps that build. It didn't really add depth. In fact, it stifled build innovation. And I think the removal of boots has been a very exciting positive change that like I look back on and I think, wow, I wish if it would have happened to me.
Yeah, and it's not even that you are really missing boots at the end of the day. You still have the movement speed from them for free on
Are you
every
missing the
single
stats
character.
of boots? You know, like, is that...
I just miss the icons. Like, I just wish I could see them.
Yeah, you can on your other monitor on the wiki.
Sometimes, I'm not going to lie, nowadays I forget that boots were even a thing.
Sure.
Like until someone brings them up. Because it's been, 2 years now? Which is not like, in the grand scheme of SMITE, they were there longer than they've been gone. Yep. But the time they've been gone has been so much better in my mind. Because like you said, build versatility.
Yeah.
Versatility. I confused those the way that my brain wanted to originally.
I just think back to the Maui trailer where he hooks up the boot and he's like, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a tangent, but for me, it's a similar argument of like, well, people talk about percent penetration. It's like, oh, you now can get it from like 2 different items. You can get max pretty easily. But they forget, you would just get Obsidian Shard and max that out with one single item whenever. It was like the easiest thing. So now that we allow for build diversity, now we allow for you to get 30% instead, because maybe not every game do you need 40% or something like that. It's just like allowing to have people, you know, switch things up each game is really useful.
It makes your build like, you can actually cater to what you're playing against and not just, well, these are the 3 items that I have. Like, I have to get boots. I'm a mage, so I have to get Ob Shard, or I'm a hunter. I have to get Titan's Bane. Like,
And do we want, it's like people could visit that argument and be like, okay, but you still have cookie items. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's worse than it was before, and it doesn't mean we're trying to solve those new problems, right? It's like, well, we're always, it's an ever-evolving game.
Always moving, always changing. I do see someone, and I've seen this a couple times, and I want to ask it only because I like the word decoupling.
I love decoupling.
But it is the concept of Nox and her Shadow Lock specifically having the damage and the CC be separate. So like have it apply a dot as opposed to only damaging while it's linked. So if they beads it right now, you know, you get hit by it, you're damaged, you're rooted, but if you beads, you lose both. And so they're asking about decoupling that and having damage separate from the
so would you
just
have
make her
like
more
5
annoying?
seconds?
So I'd hit you, you take a dot, you're rooted. You beads, the root goes, but you're still
like
taking
6
damage while you run
dot?
away.
Yeah, that's,
I guess so.
That
really
would
long
be,
That's a long dot.
Yeah.
It's not 6 seconds. Okay.
That's what it feels like. When you get shadow locked, it feels like it's 6 seconds. It's probably like 2 seconds.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit, I have a button. I'm going to hit the veto button on it strictly because I don't want any Nox buffs ever. I'm okay with her staying far away.
It's not 6 seconds.
Hear me out. I do think that it makes some sense to want to have more consistency in how you apply it.
Yeah.
However, because Nox is a character that is a beads burner, just period. She is one of the best beads burning characters in the whole game. Giving Nox more reward for you doing the counterplay does not seem like the most enticing thing in the world.
It hurts you, the guy playing against the Nox, not them, the Nox main. I get that. I can see where you're coming from. Also, because like if I hit my beads, I like to think I'm cleansed, even though I know it's like it's not
I'm
like a
good.
full true cleansing, but I feel cleansed.
I'm trying to think if this. I mean, this is not the conversation.
That's like
we
an
have
extra
now,
step of counterplay that you have to
like,
consider.
What if the range was shorter and the tether like distance was shorter, and then it did a more of like a heavy slow instead of a root, and then you had to like chase the person rather. But they'd have I don't know. There's a world, but
Let's get real crazy with it. What if you could hit somebody and then it immediately like
but they're
it
tethered
linked?
still, rather than having to chase them with the targeter.
No, you are chasing them with it. That's
Yeah, but I'm
literally
saying,
Ardio 3.
but you'd be tethered more like an Ares chain rather than
well, then that's just Ares chain.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's why we're keeping Nox the way they're.
What if you wanted to make it really complicated and it was tied to the lighting engine and she could only actually hit
if it
people
was
shadow
dark.
themselves?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk to
I can't believe we ever did
I'm
that.
gonna get chaos.
Let's call him up right now and ask.
Yeah, come on, easy peasy,
Oh, we
right?
got
It's
this.
just based on the position of the sun in the
Do that
sky.
tonight, right?
Huh?
Also, add a time
You
cycle.
can. I'm gonna go get some bow after this.
We talked about bountiful bow earlier, and that's all I can think of. Maybe a sturdy stew somewhere in.
Where's my veto button, bro?
You don't want the bow?
You just hit me instead, just
Let's see. I'm trying to see what questions we've had. Like, I guess this one made me think of something else, but they said any reverse, reworks, etc. for underperforming or highly requested gods before season 11. Probably not. Right?
I want to get on my soapbox here
because there's a lot
If you'll
happening
permit
before
me.
season 11. Like 2 more gods, right?
Season 11?
No, like for the rest of this year, before season 11, there's like still a lot.
We have
there's
the
still a lot
upcoming
happening.
gods.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
that's already happening. I don't think anything's getting fit into that pipeline.
Yep.
Yeah, but if I may for a moment here.
Soapbox.
This is
all
my
yours.
soapbox. This is my personal opinion. There are a lot of people on the design team and the balance team, so my personal opinion does not necessarily reflect all of their
biggest
opinions.
disclaimer.
Okay, we're about to hear
got some
something
whiskey
real
in
though,
this.
bro. This is about to be the realest thing Lermy has said.
I don't like reworks. I don't.
I
They
agree.
make people sad. No matter what we do, even if it is positive, people will be sad.
Yeah.
Why would we change something that people are used to in terms of people that like the god, people that don't like the god? You know, there are ways to make the characters more expressive, more fun, and I feel like we've proved that now more than ever in this last patch with our spicy changes.
Yeah.
Where we don't have to change the actual kit to
Spicy
make them
changes are really good changes.
more fun.
But so I think there are levels of gray in the definition of rework, and I think that's what's the important factor here. Is like I think there's probably someone out there who would consider what we did to Apollo a rework. And one could argue that they're not wrong, but I think the conventional description of rework for Smite has probably been around 1.5 to 2 full ability changes that really change the gameplay, how a character works. And in that sense, I mean, Lermy's right that we almost never see a unanimous positive reception on reworks, and that's something that we definitely keep in mind because they're a lot of work. Usually reworks come with ability changes, which means effects and potential animation changes, which at this point are for older gods where we have to worry about all of their skins. And if we do all of those things and we don't get the same, results as we may want, even maybe, sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes like the direction we went, doesn't work out. And it's like, well, should we have ever changed something like that in the first place? And we've got to be very, very careful because this game is 10 years plus old.
Yeah.
And there's people who will want to play those characters, like whether it's like the Boots idea, right? What if there's someone out there that was really attached to the idea of Boots? It's like taking that as an item, but putting it into an entire god. It's like, well, there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah.
We would probably rather create and move towards the future and new things than make people upset by just changing fundamentally what they might have been playing for years.
Exactly. And the thing about like reworking abilities is that like they are a lot of work, like you said, and the return is not unanimously positive. It's also not easy to ever go back if that is not like the best thing.
Yeah, there's no just like easy Control Z button.
Yes. So it's not to say that we would never feel confident in where we go, right? We always want to feel confident, we want to feel good, and that's usually data driven a lot of the time and on top of community perception, right? But the immediate solution in most players' minds, I feel like, goes to rework, and that is, it's just such a dramatic response to something that can easily be fixed with smaller, smaller, more calculated.
Throw some
changes.
bountiful bow in there, and you got something big.
With small changes, or sometimes with spice.
Chat, I'm gonna give you credit. You guys are really good at trying to fish for information. The amount of times like I have to ignore like hey, can you give us like, well, some of them are straightforward, which is like, give us a tease for the next god. And it's like, okay, I know exactly what that guy wants. Like, he's being straightforward about it. We're not doing that here. That's not what this is about.
Okay, I'll give you a spoiler.
Okay.
They're cool.
They're cool. Someone did ask who's leading, like, the next god. Like, who's, like, I guess the head of the next god.
Yeah, I mean, working on characters is always a team-based process.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't even...
usually, like...
Yeah, I don't even know if that's worth talking about now. I think watch the next patch notes show and
you'll see
the
it.
obvious.
Exactly. Because they'll come out and they'll say, yeah, so I frankly...
Exactly.
There's something... Look, not as many questions that I can read that are coming through. And so I'm going to make one up, which is, it's 3:59. How are you guys feeling, I guess, like, not only about this patch, but, like, where things are right now?
Sorry. I read does anyone have to hold aggro back from buffing Zeus like crazy? I mean,
Yes,
credit to where it lies. Aggro knows when the data and perception is correct about Zeus. Is he upset about it sometimes? Yes. But does that mean he's going to act on it? No. He's done a pretty good job.
He spent a long time with a bunch of people who made fun of him actively for a lot of things. And I feel like that hardened him into
forged in fire.
I feel like absolutely. that, it turned him in, like, he's a dad now, so he's got to do like a lot of appropriate dad choices.
If I remember correctly, when he first joined the design team, I think the first patch notes he was on had a nerf for Zeus, if I remember correctly.
that was
And I was like, this is hilarious. I'm like, welcome to the design team, like.
It doesn't matter who your favorite god is.
Yeah. So no, if we ever do buff him, he'll be the first one to chime in. But
it'll be an aggro run patch.
What the last one was,
Yeah, our personal opinions as designers are not necessarily taken into account when it comes to changes. Sometimes there will be things that we notice, whether that's on Reddit, on Twitter, through Pro League, whatever it is, and that will get brought to attention, because there is some problem or whatever it might be, or some exciting solution that is brought to the table that we can think of, but it's not necessarily like Zeus is aggro's favorite god, therefore Zeus gets buffed.
And at this point, it might not be, like, he really seemed to dig Maui, so, like, it might have been replaced. It probably hasn't, but you never know.
If we got, like, a lightning skin for Maui, I think that would
would take over.
He loves that stuff.
If Maui was, like, if he just had lightning in the kit somehow, it'd probably take over.
He just likes lightning, I think, and not necessarily Zeus. He's just like lightning.
He's got, like, a Jupiter tattoo and everything. Yeah. But he's also got a Maui tattoo, so really, it seems like he's split. Maybe he's just, like, untrustworthy. It does make me want to add...
You're just like Freudian slip that. It's like, untrustworthy. This is how I really feel.
It does make me... Man, it really makes me want to ask, like, a leading question of, like, if you could change a god, who would it be? But I know if we ask that, everybody clips that out of context, and it's going to be, here's the next choice.
No, we've talked about that. I mean, we've talked some amounts of that before, because, like Lemmy said before, in some of these questions, it's almost like a very subjective feel. It's like, who do you really want to change, or what is something that you do the most? And yeah, for me, I don't know if it's because of the skin or what, I can't play, and I don't really like the play style of Bakasura. It just doesn't mesh with my vibe.
Bakasura?
I hate the skin.
Come on.
It's like, well, it's like, I think it's hilarious when I'm playing as it, but not when anyone else is. But yeah, I don't think I would ever change him, because I understand this playstyle. It just, for me, it doesn't work out. Like, for me, I would change him, but for everyone else, we're going to change it in the direction that those players would want the most. And I think that's the difference. Is like, I know I will never like that playstyle, and I know it never worked for me. So if I had a very selfish choice, that's what I would do. But that's not what we're going to do, because that's not good for everyone else.
We are all players at the end of the day, and as players, we will have opinions that will not reflect on us as designers.
That does make me want to ask a question. And if this goes too far,
the rage one's fine.
You can yell at me, and we can close the show, because this is going to be the last question. But it is, when you're designing a god, are your personal playstyle preferences, like, do you think that has any influence? Is that something that goes into it? Or do you think, like, you could design a Bakasura, somebody that you just don't like actually after?
I think we can definitely answer this separately. For me, this one's kind of an easy question in the sense that, like, I think it can play a factor, but you have to be very aware of that bias, or aware of that playstyle choices, and realize what you're looking for. Because for us, it's always goal oriented. So rather than going into, like, a whole spiel about this, for me, I noticed very, very early on, like, I like mage characters. I like ability-based characters. That's just a fact. When I was designing Pele, I was like, I'm going to design an assassin with her themes and motifs in a way that makes the most sense for me to do that with. And what came out was a more ability-focused assassin. And that's just true. Did I add some basic deck motifs with the ulti? Sure. But I wanted to focus mostly on the theme and what I think felt correctly as a cohesive whole.
Yeah.
But if all of the brainstorms, this is where the team synergy comes in and stuff. If all the brainstorms and if the kit and everything made sense to be more basic attack oriented, then you shift that mentality. Okay, then like the playstyle and all those iterations don't matter as much. Now let's hone in on this need, this goal, and it's really making sure that the goals are met.
Yeah. And this is where we find out that Lermy has every single god in the game, Diamond, and doesn't have a specific play style that she prefers.
No, I have a specific play style.
Really?
You know what it is.
Aggressive, run it down, kill everybody, and make you double check.
I will steal
everything. That's why she likes
everybody's farm. I will invade like crazy. I play jungle for clarification. And
so what you're doing is you've just described every jungler I've ever interacted with.
You're very welcome. But that's how I play. But I haven't made a jungle character really, so I like,
really. All right, Kara in jungle, just
apparently
it was a hot commodity for like 3 people.
Yeah.
But again, I think Trelly's a Kara jungle truther.
Go off, King. I guess for me to answer your question, it's a little bit weird because Clumsy's obviously has a lot more experience with this than me, and the very interesting thing that I had to go through was designing 2 hunters in a row between Ishtar and Martikaras. Mm-hmm. That was very, very challenging, let me tell you, because not only was I like, okay, Ishtar is the kind of character that I want to make. This feels really awesome. This is the playstyle that I really love. And then I had to be, okay, now I got to flip-flop it a little bit. We got to make an ability character. But also, how do we do that? Where do we begin with that?
I mean, that makes complete sense. It goes to what I was saying as well, which I think is really interesting. Is the goal for Marty was we just did a hunter that's very basic attack focused. Yeah. Let's make sure we do one that's ability focused, and and I think that's definitely like what we're talking about. Yeah. We want to make sure we don't lean into our own biases, our own play styles too much.
Yeah, and from there, it's like you kind of had that goal. Like a lot of the times when we start with gods, we have a goal where it's like, okay, Ishtar was kind of like, we want some basic attack, but then it also goes into her theme, right? And that's kind of the secondary thing of like, how do we incorporate her theme best? What makes the most sense for Ishtar, for Martikaras, for Charon, whatever it might be, for Yu Huang, I don't want to leave him out. So in those cases, like, that is where like the individual designer has their chance to kind of shine and come up with what they think is cool, what they think is fun. And those playstyles will show through in what they individually think is fun, but also it's trying to make something different and new, right? So whichever direction the individual designer goes to, it's for the kit pitch to hear and never to go into the universe and participate in.
Well, I will say, I think you've nailed it, because I feel like the last, years of gods at this point, each one still feels very unique. They all have something, like you said, that fits to their motif and plays to their style. And the fact that it's gotten to that point, instead of just, well, this is what a hunter is, therefore this person needs this, and instead you get to have it be this wide variety and versatility, it's made the game way more fun. Yeah. And so, at least for me, I'm sure some other people out there probably, thank you for making the game as fun as it is. And thanks for hanging out with me for the last hour and answering questions, whether they were my dumb questions or chat's sometimes dumb but usually smart questions, wherever they happen to be. They all fall through. So everyone watching, thanks for tuning in. TitanClumzy again, thanks for joining me. And we'll see you for the next Dev Insight.
Yep.
Woo!